Okay, moving on to bacterial oxygen requirements, which is a new topic. Uh, so, to begin, obligate aerobic bacteria require oxygen for the final electron acceptor in the electron transport chain of oxidative phosphorylation. Conversely, for obligate anaerobes, oxygen is a deadly poison. So, obligate aerobes require oxygen, and obligate anaerobes will die in the presence of oxygen. For obligate anaerobes, it is not the actual atmospheric O2 or covalently bonded oxygen atoms, for example, the oxygen atoms in carbohydrates, that are poisonous. It is the highly reactive forms of oxygen that are toxic due to their properties as excellent oxidizing agents, meaning they're able to pick up electrons from other compounds. The compounds oxidized by the highly reactive oxygen then in turn steal electrons from other compounds, leading to a knock-on effect and a chain of oxidation causing irreversible damage to cells. As important compounds like proteins and lipids become chemically changed and lose their structural function. There are 4 forms of toxic oxygen, and we're going to go more into them in the next slide. But a brief overview, we have singlet oxygen, which is when you get a atmospheric O2 and it gets broken in half, a superoxide radical, a peroxide anion, and a hydroxyl radical. So taking a look at these 4 kinds of toxic oxygen in more detail, singlet oxygen, in singlet oxygen, the electrons are boosted to a higher energy state produced during aerobic metabolism. They're very reactive oxidizing agents utilized by some phagocytic immune cells to oxidize pathogens. Superoxide radicals, formed during incomplete reduction of O2 in the electron transport chain for aerobes and during metabolism for anaerobes. Aerobic bacteria produce superoxide dismutase enzymes to break superoxide radicals down and detoxify them. Anaerobes lack this enzyme, and so they get these radicals harm them and destroy their cells. The enzyme has zinc and ions in its active site that combine 2 superoxide radicals to produce non-toxic hydrogen peroxide and oxygen. We then have peroxide anion, formed during reactions catalyzed by superoxide dismutase. Aerobic bacteria have either catalase or peroxide enzymes to detoxify this anion. This is lacking in anaerobes, and so that's why you get the tissue damage, well, the cell damage. The anion is used to make hydrogen peroxide in aerobes. And then, I don't know why that isn't highlighted. We have the hydroxyl radical, formed as a result of ionizing radiation and from incomplete reduction of hydrogen peroxide. It is the most reactive oxygen for anaerobes, lacking the neutralizing catalase and peroxide enzymes. Aerobes can also use other antioxidants like vitamin C and vitamin E to provide electrons to reduce this powerful oxidizing agent. Now that's a bit of a mouthful. I don't expect you to kind of understand it from me just waffling on there. I just wanted to say what I wrote out loud. This is kind of a simplified version of everything going on, kind of step by step, so you know how these different kinds of toxic oxygen are being produced by cells. Read the stuff on the left to give yourself more context. And then this little thing I've produced on the bottom right here is just kind of a very easy visual summary to know. Like, you get the singlet oxygen produced during aerobic respiration from the electron transport chain, which is toxic. It can then get converted into the superoxide radical, which is toxic, and then the superoxide radical can either get turned into hydrogen peroxide, which is non-toxic, or the peroxide anion, which is toxic, but hydrogen peroxide can also be converted into the hydroxyl radical, which is toxic. And then to go through the context of how everything is made, take a look back here. Just take a couple of minutes to read this yourself. It's kind of hard to explain it within a couple of minutes in this kind of video for this kind of topic, so hopefully that makes sense. Other oxygen tolerances, so we're talking about obligate aerobic bacteria, obligate anaerobic bacteria, and then talking about aerobes and anaerobes here. The other kinds of oxygen tolerances include facultative anaerobes that are capable of living in various oxygen concentrations and can sustain themselves from either fermentation or aerobic respiration, but they reduce their metabolisms in anaerobic conditions. So an example of a facultative anaerobe would be Escherichia coli that we talked about when we were talking about opportunistic and Enterobacteriaceae family. We also have aerotolerant anaerobes, which are capable of surviving in aerobic conditions, unlike obligate anaerobes, as they possess some detoxifying enzymes mentioned in the previous slide, like the superoxide dismutase enzymes. But they do not perform aerobic respiration, so they're tolerant of air, but they don't breathe it. Microaerophiles are less tolerant to oxygen, being damaged by the 21% atmospheric oxygen concentrations, but they're able to tolerate some lower oxygen concentrations, for example those in the gut. Yeah, that's it for oxygen tolerance. The next topic is going to be Clostridium infection, so that's it.